Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really vital tool in statistical process control. It's basically a secret weapon for quality teams everywhere, the P-chart. If you've ever had to deal with inspection data where units simply pass or fail, and you found yourself wondering how to separate just, normal daily noise from a genuine process shift, well, you are in exactly the right place. We're going to break down how to confidently build and read a P-chart from raw inspection records, and honestly, more importantly, how to avoid the common math traps that trip up so many professionals.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. First, attribute data and P-charts. Second, finding the sample proportion. Third, calculating the true average. Next, limits for constant samples. And finally, the staircase of varying samples.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, Attribute Data and P-charts.
Before we even think about doing any math, we've got to set the stage and understand the exact data environment we need to use this specific tool. In quality control, we're basically dealing with two worlds of data. First, there's variables data. That's measured on a scale. Think of weighing a tablet and getting exactly 498.9 milligrams. Because that specific number tells you exactly how far off you are from a target, a tiny sample size, maybe just 5 tablets, gives you a ton of useful information. Attribute data, on the other hand, that's simply counted or classified. It asks a really blunt question. Did this pack pass or fail? Is the seal intact? Yes or no? Because a simple pass-fail gives you way less information per unit, it literally only tells you which side of the line you're on. You need much larger samples, often in the hundreds, just to see what your process is actually doing.
So here is the absolutely crucial thing to remember. We call it the rule of one. A P-chart is designed specifically to count defectives, meaning whole units that fail an inspection. It requires exactly one binary verdict per unit inspected. It is definitely not counting the total number of scratches or, individual flaws on a single device. That's a totally different chart. For a P-chart, one unit gets one verdict, conforming or non-conforming. That's it.
And you see this binary pass/fail framework literally everywhere, especially in highly regulated fields. Whether you're tracking the proportion of packs rejected at final visual inspection, vials getting thrown out for cosmetic defects, medical devices failing functional tests, or even molded parts rejected at a gate inspection, if the rule is one verdict per unit, the P-chart is absolutely your go-to tool.
Moving right along to Section 2, finding the sample proportion.
So let's get into the actual nuts and bolts of the chart, starting with the absolute simplest calculation you're going to do every single time you pull a sample. Finding your sample proportion, which we represent with a lowercase p, is beautifully straightforward. If we translate the math into plain English, Step 1, just count how many units failed your inspection. Step 2, count how many total units you actually looked at in that sample. And Step 3, divide the first number by the second. Simple. That gives you a proportion between 0 and 1.
To see how this plays out in the real world, let's look at a fictional case study from Meridian Therapeutics. We're looking at their packaging line. So in period 1, they inspected 520 packs, and 20 were non-conforming. 20 divided by 520 gives a proportion of 0.0385, so roughly a 3.85% failure rate. Now fast forward to period 19. They've had a supplier change. They inspect 620 packs, and they find 41 failures. 41 divided by 620 gives a P of 0.0661. Now that failure rate is noticeably higher, for sure, but to prove statistically that the process has fundamentally changed, we need a baseline.
Which brings us to Section 3, calculating the true average.
Okay, listen up, because this is where so many people get tripped up. It's a huge gotcha moment. Do not, I repeat, absolutely do not, just average your individual p-values together. If you just take the average of the proportions from, say, period 1 through 17, you're mathematically treating a small sample of 480 packs as exactly equal to a massive sample of 650 packs. You end up giving these small, noisy samples a super heavy vote they just haven't earned, and it throws off every single limit on your chart.
To actually do this right, every single unit you inspect needs exactly one equal vote. It's only fair, right? So, this means we have to pool our overall totals across the entire baseline before we divide. You literally add up every single non-conforming pack across your entire baseline, then you add up every single pack you inspected across that same baseline, and finally, you divide the pooled failures by the pooled inspections.
So for Meridian Therapeutics, looking at their 17-period baseline, they found a grand total of 266 non-conforming packs out of 9,610 total packs inspected. 266 divided by 9,610 gives us Meridian's true p-bar, 0.0277. This right here is our anchor. This is the true center line for our chart.
All right, on to Section 4, Limits for Constant Samples. Now let's talk about how we build the guardrails, the upper and lower control limits that sit around that center line we just calculated. Now the math behind these limits rests on the binomial distribution, but translated into plain English, the mechanics are super logical. You take your center line, your p-bar, then, based on your sample size, you calculate the standard error. Think of standard error as just the amount of natural bounce or variation you would totally expect to see by pure chance. Then, you just step out 3 standard errors above your center line to get your upper control limit, and 3 standard errors below to get your lower control limit. Oh, and if the math gives you a negative lower limit, well, it's literally impossible to have negative defects, so you just truncate it to 0.
But here's a really fascinating quirk about truncating that lower limit to 0. Because Meridian's baseline average is 0.0277, their sample size actually has to hit at least 317 units just to lift that lower control limit off of 0. Think about it. If they only inspected 100 units a period, the lower limit would be permanently pinned at 0. And if your lower limit is 0, your chart is entirely blind to process improvements. You would literally never get a statistical signal that your process got better.
And that brings us to the final part, Section 5, the staircase of varying samples.
This is kind of the climax of the whole explainer. What happens when the messy real world throws varying sample sizes at our perfectly calculated chart? Because the sample size, that n value, lives at the bottom of the standard error calculation, it drives absolutely everything. Just look at this direct contrast. A smaller sample size, say 480, gives us a larger standard error, which results in a nice wide upper control limit of 0.0501. But a large sample size of 650 gives us a smaller standard error, resulting in a much tighter, much more sensitive upper control limit of 0.0470.
And because sample sizes fluctuate every single day on the manufacturing floor depending on runtimes or shift lengths, your standard error is going to fluctuate every single day too. Because of this, every single period gets its own pair of calculated limits based on that day's exact sample size. When you plot this out, the limits step up and down. They don't look like 2 straight parallel lines. They look exactly like a staircase. The center line stays totally flat, but those limits step in and out.
Let's see why this staircase effect is so honest and honestly so necessary. Imagine your actual failure rate hits 0.0485. In period 15, which had a small sample of 480, the upper control limit was wide. It was up at 0.0501. Your 0.0485 rate falls cleanly inside the limits. No alarm sounds, everything seems fine. But in period 24, with a large sample of 650, the limit tightened down to 0.0470. That exact same 0.0485 failure rate now falls outside the limit, triggering a massive statistical alarm.
And this brilliantly illustrates a vital trade-off, actually quoting directly from the source material here. Wider limits mean a less sensitive chart. The chart is not equally alert every period. It's so true. When your sample size drops, your limits widen out, and your chart basically acts like a slower, sleepier alarm. It literally might sleep right through a real process shift simply because it didn't have enough data to prove the shift was actually real. That is exactly why you want to plan your sample sizes and try to keep them as large and steady as possible.
All right, let's wrap this all up. Here are the essential rules we've learned to confidently build this chart without falling into any traps. First, apply the rule of 1. You need exactly 1 binary verdict, pass or fail, per unit inspected. Second, always pool your overall baseline totals to find your true p-bar. Never just average your individual proportions together. Third, you've got to embrace the staircase. Recompute your limits for every varying sample size because it's the statistically honest thing to do. And finally, always remember that smaller sample sizes inherently mean wider limits and slower alarms.
So we've seen how a small sample can literally blind your p-chart to a major process shift, while a large sample catches it instantly. So I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to take back to your own manufacturing floor. Your chart is really only as sensitive as your sample size. So are you gathering enough evidence, or is your quality alarm currently asleep at the wheel? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep asking the right questions of your data.